All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many people here for another Tech in Motion event in Philly. And a special shout out to everyone tuning in live from home. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Hannah Jennings, an event organizer for Tech in Motion, and I'm thrilled to be the one to welcome you here tonight. As you all know, AI is rapidly shaping the technology landscape. It brings remarkable possibilities, but also tough questions. So tonight we have a panel of IT experts that are going to answer all of those questions for us tonight. Our moderator will run through a discussion, and then we'll also leave some time at the end for live audience Q&A. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions that come up at the end. To kick things off, I'm pleased to welcome Austin. He is from our founding company, Motion Recruitment, and he's going to share a few insights on what he is seeing in the IT landscape.
How you doing? I finally get one of those cool LinkedIn pictures where I'm holding a mic, right? And that looks like talks at events. So I'm one of the directors at Motion Recruitment. We've been putting on these events for a decade now. Tech in Motion, I believe, is 10 plus years. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room. My first Tech in Motion event was a panel just like this around cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and the blockchain. I thought everyone was crazy and did not invest 10 years ago, which is why we have our career booth over there. And I'm still doing this thing where we obviously understand how this topic is super important. Everyone's talking about it. I love the fact that we're not just up here talking about, oh, here's this cool thing I'm doing with AI. We're also looking at it from a little bit of a skeptic's view, right? Because we're Philly, right? We don't trust everything. We want to know, is this actually worth my money, right? Motion Recruitment has been doing perm and contract staffing for years. We're also doing IT solutions. If you're looking for an expert to come in and optimize your data so that your AI project actually works, right? Definitely come check out the career booth. And if you've been looking for a job in this crazy market where, your robot made your resume and now the robot's saying no to your resume when you apply to the job, we understand it's a difficult market. We've also got a booth over there with our tech salary guide, which people get really excited about. We're getting tons and tons of downloads in that every single day. And that is a quick preview of what 2026 is going to look like. That's it for me. I do want to introduce RJ, co-founder of Estenda. Is definitely well equipped for this. I believe you have your own podcast, or are you on podcasts?
On a lot of podcasts.
On a lot of podcasts. He hasn't started his podcast yet, but maybe after tonight. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you, RJ.
Thank you very much. I think the running total is like 72 now. So anytime you say AI, people are like, yes, I want to talk to you. So it makes it really easy to be a guest on other people's podcasts. And yes, the marketing folks do want me to start my own, but it's much easier to come out here and just be part of this. So thank you for inviting me and looking forward to the panel with a great group of people here. I am co-founder, CEO of Estenda, professional services focused on digital health software, data, and AI solutions. We help improve the health and well-being of our fellow humans. We have a great mission, love to help improve health and well-being. If you're not aware, we have an obesity and mental health crisis in the United States, if not the world. There's not enough professionals to take care of all of those individuals. The incentives are way off. We don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick healthcare system. So at Estenda, we're trying to make a little bit of a difference in there. AI is both a catalyst and a challenge in healthcare and many industries, as we'll hear tonight. Full of promise, but requiring careful choices, governance, and trade-offs. Tonight, we're going to dig into how each here navigating the tensions and specifically why this quarter, Q4, feels a little different. Tighter budgets, higher expectations, rising risks. But first, we want to give each panelist here an opportunity to introduce themselves. And if you could, when you introduce yourself, tell us about what's one of the most surprising lessons that you have learned about in your company. Beth?
Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Finn. I am a program director for Elsevier in our health markets division. We got a lot of healthcare up here. And so we build software to help doctors and nurses make better decisions at the point of care, manage their patient data, and just generally help improve every patient outcome, which I really love that mission that we have. It helps me be excited to wake up and go to work every day. And then what was the question? One thing that I learned that surprised me?
Surprising lesson.
About AI or just in general?
About AI. We're here to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. I think for me, it's really, when we started, we didn't know a lot about AI. I mean, we've been using AI for a long time. We have such a huge volume of content, and to make use of that data, we started using natural language processing and machine learning, I don't know, probably almost 10 years ago, maybe. And so to me, it's surprising when people today say, oh, AI is so new, but it's really not. I think it's evolving and it's becoming more well-known, but the applications have been around for a really long time, and it's growing and improving.
So my name is Lalit Panda. I've been a CIO or a chief operations officer across 8 industries in public VC-backed companies of all sizes, from $20-30 billion companies to $1 to $5 billion range. I have had the experience of working across AI in different ways, and to RJ's question, the thing that surprises me, and many of you may not have probably seen the hype when the internet came late 90s. I was a CIO at that time. And it seems like the similar time now, but the scale with which the infrastructure is being built is very surprising to me. I mean, it all says that everything has to work perfectly in order for companies to start recovering money out of these investments. So I think that is the scale and the speed of expectations is what surprises me.
Hi, I'm Kristen Bender. I'm a tech executive, global CIO. I have worked in the chemical industry for most of my career. My last company was the marine industry. I will tell you, if you have a chance to do that, it is very fun to be on a harbor in New Zealand testing out equipment on a boat. So highly recommend that. I've led a lot of global ERP transformations for the majority of my career. I like to solve big, messy problems. That's one of the things that I really enjoy. From an AI perspective, my former company, we were on the cusp of doing some smaller things, but we weren't quite there yet. One of the things that you'll hear me kind of talk about is data. I have worked with data, again, most of my career, and where I came from had 8 different ERP systems, and the data that comes from each of those systems, there is no way without kind of putting duct tape and chicken wire on it, especially from a cost perspective, unless you're going to put in a very large data management system, to really get what we could get from insights and machine learning out of that. So data is one of my big pet peeves. We've got to get the data right, and you have to get the foundation right. So again, I could go on forever. I'm not going to. I'm going to hand it over to Steve.
Hey guys, I'm Steve Singer. I'm the CIO for a company called Julius Silvert. We're a 110-year-old food distribution company, probably supporting the obesity problem, RJ, that you're fighting here in Philadelphia. We are a fine foods distributor here in the city. Most of the restaurants that you eat at are our customers. So the thing that is astonishing to me, surprises the heck out of me in AI, is what people think it is versus what it really is. I teach at Rowan University as an adjunct professor, and I do have some students watching, so hi guys. And the thing that I really see on an everyday basis is somebody goes in, they copy and paste the email that they get and go, give me a response. And you get the robotic response, and then you get the artifacts and everything that happens. And people don't understand what's actually happening behind the scenes. That is what amazes me the most. I think here today you're going to learn a lot about it, and I'll pass it back to RJ.
Thank you. Great to have you all as part of the panel. And yes, that obesity crisis that many people contribute to. I'm often asked, what happens if it's solved? What happens to you? I'm like, I'll go with something else to do. I hope it gets solved. So looking forward to that. Maybe AI has something to do with it, maybe not. It's not a silver bullet, but we'll hear a lot about that. AI promises transformative potential. But today, economics are tough. Every investment has to earn its place. The challenging isn't spotting opportunities, it's separating hype from what truly drives value and aligns with your organizational strength. Lalit, let's get started with you. When you're evaluating AI opportunities, how do you separate the hype from investments that align with your organization's strengths?
Right. So I think I'll just start with maybe a note about, what the research shows right now. If any of you have read the report from Nando at MIT, 95% of AI projects are failing. And Gartner says that 30% of Gen AI projects and 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled before 2027. So there's a lot of hype around, what the results will be versus what we are seeing right now. And I think the long-term potential is very high, but, there is a time and a runway that is needed before it can show those results. And managing expectations is very key. So to manage expectations, I think it's very important to start with core fundamental, financial goals or operational goals and clear the metric with everybody so everybody's expectations are aligned with what's feasible. Because otherwise what happens is there's a whole slew of projects that start coming up. And then eventually, everything starts being questioned whether there's result. And, companies are spending tens of millions of dollars on this. So, in order to make sure that you are going to get some value out of it, my feeling is that, it's very important. And we always start with process before we go to technology, right? To identify processes that will be really impactful. I think that is where it is important to start. And what people have found and what research shows is that those attempting cross-functional, large-scale, transformative projects are going to fail. The ones that are going to succeed and are succeeding are the ones that are focused on one pain point and being able to develop that within, within one process area instead of trying to do it cross-functional process. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think before you dive into using AI, you have to really understand your use case and why you think AI is going to help you with it. It's not a silver bullet, and it's not going to just do everything. And we have to know how we want to use it and why we want to use it before we can be successful using it.
Are there any particular signals or things that you can call out that really tell you an AI isn't going to be worth it? Like you were just talking about process and really fine-tuning on one thing. Like someone comes to you and says, I want to solve the world's problems. That's probably a signal they haven't thought about it as well.
Yeah, I think the cross-functional piece where you're trying to build a AI agent that goes across different functional processes, that's very difficult to execute because that's far more complicated than building an agent that deals with only one specific functional process. And, the other thing about this is augmentation versus automation. Many people think that, you can automate an entire process. But what I would submit is that it is always better to start with augmenting the productivity of people. Like we were talking, I think somebody was mentioning about, I think you were mentioning about the software productivity, the gains that they're, maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. So at Elsevier, we're both using AI to help make us more productive and also putting AI into our products. But we've really tried to go all in on it because I think it's hard to do it halfway, especially to help our employees be more productive. So we're using, GitHub Copilot and things like that to help our engineers. And it's taking away sort of the grunt work from them, which makes them a lot more productive. And in our pilot, I think we found that our engineers saved something like 4 hours a week by using some of these tools. That adds up to a ton of time that lets us go faster. When you put it across 500 engineers, that's a huge amount of savings. And it's not that we want to reduce the number of people that we have. It's that we want to go faster with the people we have.
That was one of the things we did the Copilot for GitHub and really like a 20 to 30% increase in productivity for folks. And that was really, really helpful for the teams. I think one of the points that you made as well with putting it in one functional area, going cross-functional is super difficult. Again, depends on the foundation that you have set in your company. But getting some really quick wins instead of doing, you could have like a graveyard of POCs if you try to go too fast without the right foundation in place.
So, Kristen, you just mentioned, quick wins versus long-term bets. Yeah. How do you think about when resources are tight, quick wins versus, long-terms in AI adoption and where you might invest those dollars?
So I know there's certain areas. So again, like software development, that was kind of a no-brainer where I came from. When you can go on the manufacturing shop floor and input specific technologies that are going to help you find defects faster. If you're going to gain process efficiencies, we did that with customer service. Again, it was function by function. It wasn't, across the board. I think from a long-term perspective, really one of the things that's important is for leadership, technical leadership, to really have that good communication and trust with your CEO, with your senior leadership team, to really help balance and understand this is what this can do at this time with what we have, and start to change the narrative, start to, build a culture around AI. But I think the one thing that really not kills us as tech professionals, I know I always want to go do really cool things, but you have to have your senior leaders that are around you and you're at the table really understand what you can do, because you're spending millions of dollars to do these types of things. So you need to make it worth your while. So,
I find it interesting. You guys are talking about solving these global problems, and I'm using AI to generate some photos of food.
That's important too. You got to make it look yummy.
In our space, we're selling business to business, and we have about 7,000 different SKUs, right? And I don't have enough chefs in the city to create dishes and get the perfect picture every single time. Food is messy, it's not perfect, and it's this artistry. So to get it to look good and to make it sold, right? One of the use cases that we have that really does move the needle for us is to put our raw ingredients in the pan, right? Click the button and generate the image, and not actually take the 4 or 5 hours it might take to cook the entire menu, right? It's one of the use cases.
I'll just add one thing here. Kristen was talking about machine learning and AI. AI has been around a long time, as Beth was saying. One use case which had a tremendous impact in one of the companies I was working in was on the manufacturing floor. You've got asset productivity is determined by downtime, right? So if you can minimize the downtime, you improve the output or productivity. It's measured in what's called operational equipment effectiveness, OEE. And we were able to increase 15%, which means basically you added 15% capacity without any capital investment by reducing the downtime, because you were able to predict when those machines will fail. And so you do preventive or predictive maintenance with that. Another use case where we had a tremendous impact was with forecasting. Demand forecasting with machine learning took our accuracy levels up by 35%. So it's a significant impact on net working capital and free cash flow. So there are examples where, there's tremendous value that's coming in. What's new is Gen AI, and Gen AI is probably going to deliver some, use cases like this, which result in significant financial and operational benefits. But at the moment, it's more in the traditional machine learning AI world that I have seen a big impact.
There you go. Can anybody think of an example of an AI project that someone in your team came to you and you said, "Nah, we're not quite ready for that. The AI is not quite ready," that you weren't willing to invest in at this point in time?
I can give one example of that. So, I was in a company that had about 60 different entities with all different ERPs across 19 countries. And, the ask was, can you get financial reporting come out seamlessly, in one way? And, to Kirsten's point about data and data preparedness, we didn't have that. So it's very difficult to promise any AI-related, reporting enhancements without getting your data house in order. So you focused really on the data layer in between the ERPs to clean that up before we could start delivering some results.
We were the exact same story, and I would be really curious to see if anybody else in the room afterwards has that exact same story. I'm sure there's a lot of people, but yeah, if you don't have that data set on the back end, it's not going to come out in the way that you want. And you're going to make bad predictions.
I think that when we're looking at systems and we're looking at processes that are just an absolute no, whenever we look at something that is an aging infrastructure or a system or software that doesn't have a way of programming directly in, or you have to create a bridge for some reason, sometimes I look at those things and I look at the return on investment, it's just not there, right? So looking at the dollars and cents, from the bottom line of what you have to get out of what you're going to build to get there. A lot of businesses today are still running on some pretty old metal, and there's no connectivity to the cloud. So we have to look at those things as senior leaders. We have to take a look at those budgets, and we have to look at the people that we have on our teams and say, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Let's not spend the money here.
What use cases make sense for us to pursue? You can do a lot with generative AI around healthcare. We've talked about, well, maybe we want to help the doctors write pre-authorization letters or things like that. But that's not really our core business. And so we have to be very conscientious about where we're putting our energy, because we could go off in 100 directions that maybe don't make sense for what our customers want and what we're good at.
Okay. So we talked a lot about what you not doing with AI. Let's transition and talk about what we do with AI. Lalit, you mentioned MIT recently did release a study, The State of AI in Business, and found that 95% of AI projects fail to realize a return on investment. Others are more positive on that. But when you see a number like 95%, that does scare you. And they're talking about pilots. And we do see it a lot in digital healthcare for a lot of reasons. But Stephen, AI pilots are easy. Scaling up is hard. What's worked or not worked? So let's stick with what's worked. Talk enough about what's not worked. That's what's worked. We're moving from experiments to production.
For us, a lot of things in IoT. You can imagine that we have a way of looking at our warehouse and seeing it in different temperature controlled areas, right? Nobody in here wants to get milk at 60 degrees. It's not going to taste good. It's not good when you put a creamer in your coffee. One of the things that we've done around our warehouses is convert them to some digital agents, right? Some Internet of Things objects. It's temperature sensing, it's humidity sensing. And what we're doing with that, instead of having somebody manually go and take a temp gun and check it, right? Everybody remembers COVID, right? We're checking everyone's forehead. Same thing. Checking fruit, checking vegetables, checking those kinds of things. We have devices that are doing this and saving us over 30% in our spoilage alone, right? It's also actively keeping our food safety levels at a way that the city allows us to continue doing business. And we want to keep it in a place where it's safe for us to eat. Because again, I go out and feed that obesity problem you're trying to fight, RJ.
I'll just add one thing here. So one of the other things that research is also showing is that when you look at areas, 50% of investment in AI now is going into marketing and sales. But that's not where the value is. The value is in back office where, processes are cumbersome and it takes a long time to get something done. So if you can reduce, a processing time of, let's say, an order processing time, something like 10x or something like that, what people are experiencing by cutting down process steps and automating some of that, I think that's much more high value than attempting, major content development or through something like that in marketing. That's where, results are being seen. But I also feel that, how you approach, this AI execution is also key, because there is also, studies that find that, 2/3 of investments made with third parties, with internal software development is failing, whereas 1/3 that is actually with third parties outside. So this is a buy versus build scenario where if you try to develop it internally, the chances of success are less compared to buying models from outside and using that, and that is also a faster cycle in terms of getting things done. And I think the key here is managing expectations. When you build internally, the resources that you need to build them are very difficult to find now and all that. So I think that's another thing to consider when you figure out which ones you want to attempt doing.
I think one other key to scaling is that when you run that pilot and it is successful, you've got to really understand your lessons learned and what made it successful and what maybe made it not so easy for the people doing it. So really understanding those lessons learned and making sure that when you scale it and expand it, people know those things. I think that's important too.
So what is an example of one of those lessons that you have learned? Anybody else, feel free to jump in here.
I'll answer here. One of the things that I like to tell people is specifically build where the data is proprietary, right? And buy where something is a commodity. That is the easiest way to make a quick decision in a boardroom or in a discussion. Build wherever you can if it's proprietary and it's culture fitting for you, right? And buy if it's available to everybody else.
Is there any piece of conventional wisdom about scaling AI that you think's wrong or is at least overrated? Kristen, thoughts?
I couldn't hear. I'm so sorry.
Overrated.
Yeah, the speed. I think one of the things that's a little overrated, again, from a speed perspective, is and having the right. And again, I go back to people a lot, but having the right people that understand the right competency, that understand how to implement these things. So that's one thing. Having the leadership that understands how to, talk with the senior leadership team and the CEOs, like I said, to be able to communicate what the value is. But I really think it's a huge culture change, and I really think that we need people to really understand how to go along the journey with us. And that's the other thing. We go along, it's a journey, right? With any kind of technology that we implement, but with AI, how to go on that journey.
I think this is the single biggest change management exercise that we have seen in the last couple of decades. The scale with which, it's not just the change management around getting people to adopt it, but also, in terms of addressing the concerns they have about, how that is going to play out eventually in terms of their roles and stuff like that. So I think it's very important to, there is always that sweet spot where you don't want to move too fast and break things, or you don't want to move too slow and lose credibility. So finding that sweet spot, I think, is going to be very critical for all these change management exercises.
I guess one more quick, on the change management, building off of that. And it's not just your tech team that's implementing it. You have to have that partnership with your business team, and they have to actually understand what it's doing and why. So that's kind of that whole business partnership piece too. The change management, they're huge components of any kind of implementation.
I think, I'll add one of the pieces I think that really kills the implementation of something like that is not giving live data. AI is very fast, and it's great to take sandbox data. It's great to take a budget look or a POC. We had this discussion as a panel before most of you were in the room, which, you can have that graveyard, as you were talking, Kristen, right, where the stuff just ends up in the trash. And to change management, right, you really don't get the true use of AI until you give it true content, make real world decisions. And it's really hard to do that starting terribly small. So you have to take some risk, some calculated levels of risk, but you have to give it some live data and let it help you make some decisions. At least show you the option of what the human would do versus what the AI component to do, and then let people make those decisions from there.
Well, and especially I think with generative AI, well, probably just in general, you can't let the data get stale either. You have to constantly be improving and adding and updating it. So you can't just set it and forget it.
Yeah. We know AI is not the silver bullet and has challenges, and change management is a big part of this. Ethics are a part of this. It's a small example, but you're using AI to generate images of food. So are we taking away jobs from people? I would say no, we're creating new jobs. What are you doing internally from an organizational perspective, from governance policies or guidelines around the compliance and the ethics of using these solutions?
I mean, we're a publishing company originally, and so it's a very serious concern for us, right? And our authors, we have very strict policies about our authors using AI. We have very strict policies about how we use AI. And, we have a responsible AI policy that we've had for quite a few years now. And, we make sure that every one of our employees knows what that responsible AI policy is, and that, they have to certify that they've read it and, do their compliance training. It's become part of our compliance and expectation that everybody knows and understands it. So, yeah, that's where we started.
I'll just address this in two different ways, one for regulatory and one for compliance. I don't know if some of you remember Amazon when they released their, assessment tool for applicants. They had to withdraw it after a while because it eventually started giving more preference to male candidates as opposed to female candidates. It was a compliance issue because until you clear out bias in some of these algorithms and models, I think it's very dangerous from a legal perspective to what you are open to. The other piece around regulatory, I think there is a lot of change happening in the regulation and in the data privacy around AI. And, if you are a global organization, you need to keep tabs on what's happening in different countries because the regulatory environment is not the same everywhere. And here it is, in the US, it's go, but in other places, it's more like slow go. So you have to be careful about especially in fields like healthcare and others, which is highly regulated. I think that's very important too.
Well, and there's regulation about where the data can be stored too. And so, especially in other countries, you have to store the data in country. So you got to really think about how you're going to manage that.
Go.
It's where the buy versus build comes in my space, right? If you're looking at the data to live and it's not a normalized place, we have to look at the country in which we're supporting the users that are going to interact with it, right? I have the luxury of it being mostly East Coast, mostly here in Philadelphia, right in the Northeast. So the way that we're saving the information and what we're doing with it seems more of a commodity than anything else. But the proprietary information underneath, right? Those ingredients, RJ, in those dishes that we're building those images for, that's the proprietary portion. That's the art.
I was just going to say, you don't want to have, the accuracy lost in automation. And I think part of that is you don't want to bypass human judgment too at the end of the day. So that's the other thing from an ethical perspective. I know for where I've been prior, we were, again, kind of on the cusp of implementing some of these things, and there weren't policies yet in place, unfortunately. And so you're kind of doing it after the fact, which can also be a little dangerous, depending on the industry that you're in too, right?
Well, a couple of things about this also, I think getting the chain of thought, very clear so people understand exactly how the model is actually, coming up with the answers, and also making sure that there is a human in the loop in some of these processes, that there is human oversight. One of the examples I'll give is that we tried to automate the billing process from our suppliers. And, we eventually got up to something like about 85% that we could process automatically without human involvement. But those 15% really needed human involvement because, there are some exceptions that will always stay outside until the model gets to, above 90%. You have to have the human in the loop.
Even when it's better than that, and depending on the industry, in healthcare, if you get it wrong, somebody could die. And so it's really important to us that we have that human in the loop, making sure that the answers we're generating are helpful and not harmful.
We mentioned the MIT report a couple of times that it found a 95% failure rate, which is pretty high. But it also found 90% of employees using Gen AI in these organizations, even though only 40% of the companies that part of the survey are actually using subscriptions. So they're seeing the use of these solutions out there. And multiple studies have found an increase in productivity using Gen AI, particularly in software development. If you're not familiar, Ethan Mollick is a professor at Penn here in the city. Great follow on LinkedIn. He's done a ton of research and work around AI. He did a study a while ago that found a 40% improvement in quality of work and 26% increase in productivity. And he's constantly doing these real world tests and examples to see, where the rubber hits the road. And it's a question about ROI. It's like, how do you actually know you're making a difference? Is the software developer being more productive? Yeah. Stephen, do you have it, like, when it comes to this AI, how are you defining success? What metrics matter to you?
KPIs, right? The items that we're looking at from an everyday standpoint to the human being, and what are we giving back to that human being in time? One of the best use cases that we've come up with a tool that allows us to match our internal catalog of 6,000, 7,000 SKUs to the ingredients that a restaurant may use in their dishes, right? We take the best guess. We allow our salespeople to take a picture of something like this, and it saves them 5-6 hours of quoting and can turn something around to a chef in 15 or 20 minutes. That's return on investment, real world. It's a proprietary product, right? So it's something that we had to patent. It's something that is specifically for us and not a commodity, so that we couldn't just buy it. We look at things like this, and we look at our KPIs, and we look at the bottom line. Where are the margins? What are we using in those margins? And how are we maintaining margins, right? Those are the questions that we have to answer. And it goes back to, I think, what Beth said in the beginning, planning. You have to look at it from the top down and the bottom up.
I mean, this is an anecdotal story. It's not really exactly a measured thing, but one of our products is called Clinical Key AI, and it lets the physician ask a question about a patient or about a medical condition, and it uses our huge database of content to generate an answer. So we know that it's using trusted sources and all of that. And so an emergency room physician said to us that the answers he was getting from it were so good that he didn't have to call his specialist at 2 a.m. to wake them up. And to me, I mean, that's a huge win, right? If you're not waking up your people in the middle of the night, and let them be better rested when they come in the morning.
Quality of life for your physicians. There you go. Good metric.
I would again go back to this augmentation versus automation discussion. The examples you gave of what Ethan Mollick has, by the way, he's a great speaker on this. But the thing about this is that the examples he quotes are the ones where productivity gains were experienced by people within an organization doing the process they were doing, but much faster and more efficiently with the aid of AI. Now, automating that person is a very different, I think, goal to set, because that involves an entire slew of different processes and different agents that you have to coordinate or orchestrate in order to be successful. So I think that's where the ROI is, where, you take a specific set of tasks that people are doing and, augment their effectiveness in doing that. Now, the question about people using AI in the workspace, even though the company doesn't, installed AI within their organization, I think that's also a compliance issue. People need to be careful about exactly what they're using AI for. Sometimes, company data could be compromised if they put information out there, because most of these models are really sucking in data and, keeping them for future, learning and improvement. So that's one thing to be concerned about also.
Yeah, company I was at actually was considering turning off ChatGPT. They didn't have an enterprise license for it, and they said, we don't want our proprietary data out there, and they were actually going to block it for people. So that was interesting conversations we were having at my lab.
Now, we make a big deal about not using the public ones, and we do have enterprise licenses so that we know that our proprietary data is protected, but it's a serious problem. And as a company, if you're not implementing something for your team members, they're gonna use it anyway. So I think you have to really think about that.
Yeah. Do you have any real world examples where you've been able to measure delivered efficiency, savings, or even a new revenue stream?
I think in supply chain, the AI pricing elasticity is one of the things that we see, where it's made measurable differences in margin. I'll take a simple commodity item that we all know is scarce sometimes, eggs, right? In some cases, the price of eggs in a grocery store is a lot different than the price of eggs for someone in a restaurant, right? Seems to me that we get some commodity pricing, we make sure that we're running it through AI. We're basically scraping, right, the internet to figure out what is a good price. The restaurants in real world, they set those prices unless you see that MP for market price catch of the day kind of thing, right? Going in what you're going to buy. You know how much that steak dinner is going to cost you. But the restaurateur does not know how much it's going to cost them to get those prices. They're taking their best guess at keeping that dish fresh and affordable so that everybody will go and eat it. So we span the different markets to make sure that our pricing is competitive in its space. And we're keeping a margin that keeps the restaurateur in business, and it adds true value to the bottom line, and it saves tons and tons of research time and hours on our purchasing and procurement teams.
Our traditional business model is a institutional one, right? We sell to hospital systems and universities and things like that. And so, but with some of our AI products for the first time, we are selling direct to clinician and giving individual users the opportunity to purchase it for themselves, which gives it access a lot quicker. An institutional sale takes a long time, and to get it up and running for an institution takes a long time. And long time is not good with AI, right? Everybody wants it now and today. And so giving that opportunity to the clinicians to be able to access it on their own, I think is really exciting. And that's definitely a new revenue stream for us.
I'll give one example, going back to the manufacturing process. And this is something that can be adapted to other areas also. So we had this, huge, high volume, really massive manufacturing machines, making these 1,000 boxes a minute kind of process. And so any variation, like if you recollect with, Six Sigma approach, you've got this upper and the lower control limit. And what happens is because the settings in the machine, there is a drift. And eventually what happens is that you get a lot of failed products or, losses in the manufacturing process. So we put in an algorithm which started tracking the drift. And when the drift got, on one side of this tendency to hit the upper control level or the lower control level, it would flash warnings, and then we would reset the process parameters to bring it within there. And so what happened out of that is that the quality or productivity, first pass quality went up by 10%. And that is immediate material, waste reduction, right? So that is a huge ROI. And so if you take that process and use that same thing with any other process, you see a process functioning within the UCL and the LCL, and there's a drift. You can reverse that and control it and make better quality.
Yeah. There's a case that comes to mind in digital health and doctors now with ambient listening. And, how many doctors, healthcare professionals do you know that have gone into healthcare to take notes in front of a computer? They're there to make those patients feel better, improve their health and well-being. So the idea of ambient listening is it's listening to the environment in the room and taking the notes. There's something called pajama time where that doctor, the nurse, they're going home at the end of the night, eating dinner, putting the kids to bed, and then sitting there for 2 hours trying to document their notes. And so quality of life can now be improved with this ambient listening technology. I think of quality of life as sort of one of those non-traditional metrics that you don't always track. Are there any other examples of non-traditional metrics that you might be looking at in terms of AI projects?
I think go-to-market speed is one of the biggest pieces that I would look at there. Today, you can have a team of people coding all day long, right? Or we could accelerate it with some AI and some basic fundamentals and give framework to get your product or your idea go to market that much quicker. It gets you testing quicker. It gives you return on investment faster. It also allows you to move on from failed POCs quicker.
I think there's also some employee satisfaction measures that you could take. If I'm a software engineer and the part of my job that I hate is writing all that, initial code and the basic foundational stuff, and the AI can do that for me, my job becomes more interesting and I get to focus on the interesting problems that need my brain to solve, right? So I think there's an employee satisfaction measure there too.
I would actually add some metrics that are traditional in terms of how they've been used, but not in traditionally used on a software product. And an example of that is, like, let's say, one of the big uses of AI is in customer service agents, right? So they are now automating. In fact, some of the places you will call, you'll probably not realize that you're actually speaking to an AI agent and not a human being, right? So metrics that we used in the customer service process was customer churn or, a net promoter score and those kind of things. Now they are being applied on the software agent because it is the same outcome that we are trying to do with an automated system as opposed to a human being. So I think there is also that, movement from using metrics that were measured, that were used to measure human productivity into software output.
In my former company, speed to market was one, and then that actually coincided with employee satisfaction because our software would get so frustrated. And so, we had that 20 to 30% increase in productivity for them, which took me 4 hours a week-ish. But we had release after release that was delayed. And so we were actually starting to make better time market with the addition of some of that help for them. So and they were extremely happy about it. So
Great examples. Thank you. We heard about people there a lot. So, we know AI is reshaping technology, it's reshaping teams, it's reshaping work itself. As this adoption accelerates and the skills we value, the way we hire, how are we going to keep people involved at the core of this? So as this accelerates, what skills are becoming more valuable? Prompt engineering, data literacy, cyber?
I mean, all of that, I think. And not everybody's going to be expert at all of those things. But I think it's important. It's the change management. You have to bring people along the journey with you, and you have to give them the skills and the tools that they need to be successful. You can't just assume, they probably will go out and Google it, but you can't just assume that they're going to get the information they need to be effective by doing that. So you want to make sure you're giving them the tools and bringing them along with you.
I think for me, from a competency perspective, it's great, data algorithms you can do, you're a data scientist, but I really want somebody that's going to be curious, that's always going to be looking at things on their own to see how it works, challenging the status quo, who can ask better questions, who can come up with and translate those business problems into those opportunities. Like that is the most important thing, at least to me from a competency standpoint. But the curiosity is huge. I will admit, I'm doing a little side project for myself with my closet. I can't find an app that I like for closet organization. I know it's crazy. So I'm doing some things myself with it just because I'm curious. I want to see how it's going to work. And that's what I want from an employee, basically.
This is so important because I remember going back to my business school days, there was a framework called CAS, Knowledge, Attitude, and Skills. And in all my years of working in the corporate sector, I always hired not for knowledge and skills, but for attitude. Because I think once you have somebody with a growth mindset and curiosity, like Kristen said, I think it becomes a lot easier to develop that person. And, in the environment that we are in, people will have to change very fast, very quickly and retrain, learn, to work with AI agents and to adapt to, continuously changing processes. So if we don't have people who have growth mindset or critical thinking ability to question, sometimes one of the things, I should have mentioned this earlier. So one of the challenges around AI is, I don't know if some of you have heard about this work slop. If the AI model is going to come out with stuff that is got to be tested and checked and validated and, curated, then, this is not resulting in any improvement. It's adding more friction. So I think it's very important to have that critical thinking ability to be able to question if the result is believable or not. And that's how credibility is driven with an AI system.
If I could take my CIO hat off for just a second and be Professor Steve for just a couple of minutes. In the terms, I teach around 75 students, and I'm humbled daily at what they know how to do with AI versus what I do not know how to do with AI. I'm always looking for the human being that wants curiously to design a closet or to figure out what governance we're going to do. I'll hear more about that afterwards, right? I'm looking at things that we don't know. RJ and I are not styling our hair, right? So these are things that we're going to use with AI. I want the student, the human being that's going to have that interaction. I want the person coming into the room and knowing they don't know everything, but they're not going to ask AI every single question, right? I want that person to use AI as a tool to enhance their education, not hide from a test or quiz, right? I saw earlier today 2 students from Drexel University. Thank you guys for showing up because I went there myself, right? And I look at engineering school, and if I had that tool back then, what I would have done to get out of some of those writing assignments, right? I want that student that comes forward and says, hey, how can I use this to help enhance what I'm learning? How can I use it to get the basis of using MLA formatting or APA formatting, put that to the side, and actually give the content that I'm looking for in the first place?
There are a lot of students in here, presumably some of your own online as well. A year from now, what AI skills or roles do you think everyone will be talking about that we don't see exist today? How's the world going to change in 365 days?
Once upon a time, no one in this room trusted the cloud with their data. Some of us don't trust the cloud with their data today, Kristen. Right? So we have to trust that we're going to normalize what tool sets we're going to use. There's a new AI from every vendor that's trying to sell all of us something on a daily basis. It's the word in Tesla's car, right? It's the new program in security. It's the tool that's going to offset GitHub and help the programming students get there quicker, the engineers, right? The tool that's going to come out that normalizes it and gives us a space to prompt the same. Just like there's multiple different languages that we speak, there's multiple programming languages. Not every AI tools adapt to every single one of those languages. We need something to help normalize the space so the everyday human being, right? Beth and I were talking earlier, our moms are watching, right? That our parents can use these tools, right? So all these people that will know how to just insert the question, get an answer that makes sense, and help us actually drive something home.
And they won't be afraid of it either.
True.
This is not exactly on the question, but I think one of the things we're going to have to think about is the energy usage and the environmental impact of all of these AI uses. Speaking of my mom, my parents live in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is the data center capital of the world. And every time I go down there, like once a month, there's a new data center that pops up. And her property taxes actually went down because there was so much tax revenue coming in from these data centers. But that has an impact on the people in those communities, and it has an impact on the electric grid and all sorts of things like that. So I hope that there are smart people working on that problem and how to make it more energy efficient and that kind of thing. Because if we don't, I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble in a year or not much longer than that.
That was something else. We have a massive footprint being created. So yeah, and there's massive spending that's happening. And there was a interesting Wall Street Journal article, I think 25th or 26th of September, that talked about that spending, what Elon Musk is doing in Memphis, and what it's going to take to maintain that. And they kind of likened it to the original inception of the internet and the infrastructure that we were racing to build, and spent so much money doing that, and is like, wah, wah. So we, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the carbon footprint too. So,
the brain is about 2% of your body weight, but it takes 20% of your energy. And that's exactly what we are seeing here now. And we are only seeing the start of the AI wave. Think about what it is going to be when AGI comes in, So it is going to be a significantly different scenario. One of the things that potentially is going to happen is nuclear energy. Like now you have these SMRs which are coming in. In fact, I invested in a company that is building these on an assembly line. They're starting with the Defense Department. They're building small reactors on an assembly line, and they can get out these things that can be in a garage and power 50,000 homes, that level of power. So, these AI data centers, there was one article I was reading where one data center in Nebraska or someplace has got like about eight times the size of a Home Depot, and it consumes energy for 50,000 homes. And they placed it in Nebraska because it's cold out there and the heating load will be a little lower. So think about that, the impact on the environment, as Kristen was saying, but also in terms of the consumption of energy from a scale of what it takes to run all these data centers is huge.
I think that was one of the interesting parts of the article too. And I was reading, and it was a lot. You can go fact check me on this one, but I was pretty sure the facility that Musk is building, the amount of energy output would fuel 800,000 homes. Again, go fact check me, but I'm pretty, like 99.8% sure that's what that was. And that's a lot. That was a lot.
So the impact of that on us is that the scale with which AI will develop, you have to be a little realistic, how fast it is going to, because people are saying that in 3 years you'll have, AGI and, things will be running. The energy required to accomplish those goals is not going to happen in 3 years. So we have to be a little realistic and, manage that hype, because this is now in a hype cycle. For sure, it is going to slow down. And as people realize that even, I don't know if you came across this, the new version of ChatGPT that came out, 5, is not as effective as they thought it would be, And so I think the scale with which these models gain in terms of efficiency and, power is not at the scale that people are expecting because of the infrastructure constraints that are building.
There you go. So we want to move into Q&A here in a minute, but what's one piece of advice you give people in this room who want to move fast on AI without losing trust or burning out their teams or being fearful of losing their jobs?
I would say the most important thing is to manage expectations, and not overpromise, but underpromise and overdeliver. So pick a very specific use case that you feel very confident about after talking to a lot of business folks of where the maximum value is. You've got to create a portfolio, pick the ones that you think have the maximum impact, and then just focus 100% on delivering those very effectively. I think that is how credibility is built, and that is how it will start. So I would say make that particular thing so good and scaled across the organization horizontally before you start thinking about, broad transformation efforts.
Get your data right. Get your data right. It's probably the most unsexy thing I have to talk about at the leadership table, but get the data right. You're not going to get what you want out of it if you don't at least get that piece right, or some piece of it. If you're going to go, by a functional area, get that data correct, get that foundation there.
I think my advice would be to make sure you understand how AI can augment your role and augment the things that you do, rather than being afraid that it's going to replace you. I think the people who are going to be the most successful in the future are the ones who can take advantage of the things that AI is good at and make them better at their jobs. And so, make sure you use it to augment.
It's a great segue to my point. There's a lot of young people in this room know how to do the job first. Before you augment, before you try to use the easy button, try to learn exactly how to do it manually. That would be the most beneficial piece of advice if you could leave the room with. Know how to do the job first. Then figure out how to speed it up and make it easier with an AI component.
You have to know what to ask, what to prompt, and you have to use your critical thinking skills to know it told you a good answer, because hallucinations are real. With that, we like to transition to questions. Anybody questions in the room? We'll start over here on the side of the hat. You're closest.
Hey, how's it going? Great panel. I liked all the answers. I noticed that like you guys are all in different industries, and I wanted to understand whether you were using model context protocol with any of the AI that you've been working with.
Yeah, we have experimented with that. I think context is very important because otherwise what happens is, the credibility of the responses goes away if you don't have memory and context. So I think that is very important to make sure that when you are implementing something, again, like I go back to this example, that you take one specific process, build the context around that, and then start, expanding. So that is my suggestion.
Yeah, it's important for us to, they're not just going to ask one question, right? They're going to have follow-up questions. They're going to, want to know more potentially. So we have to understand that context. And then some of our other products, we have a tool to help nurses study for their NCLEX exams. And it helps them understand where they need to study more, and it helps them study more. So it has to understand where the context for that too.
Hi, great panel. Thank you for bringing up both ethics and AI governance. However, I'm curious about the degree to which you've been able to kind of merge traditional CISO responsibilities or cybersecurity responsibilities with an internal AI governance team, and if you have shared responsibilities for CI/CD pipelines, recognizing both the security and AI risk overlap.
I love that question. That is such a good question because it's so important. I know I worked hand in hand with my CISO, with our software development team. And because there were a lot of things, especially like identity and access management, there were things that were completely open that we needed to kind of close off. So she and I were working extremely close together. And I think that's just a true partnership in any kind of tech that you're implementing, AI, whatever. That security piece has to be evaluated and looked at first. So I love this that security is brought up. Great question.
Great panel. Thank you, guys. Just had a question about alignment and kind of a worst case scenario in terms of like the singularity, because kind of a black box with what's going on. You mentioned like people make prompts, they don't know what's going on, and they just accept the answer. So what's your opinion for AGI and things 10, 20 years down the road in terms of humanity and ethics and the alignment problem?
I think that question's too far out. We have to answer it in the next 3 years and think of the architecture in 5 that we have to answer, right? Back to the original point of my suggestion is know how to do the job first. There's going to be a fringe in generative AI content that you're going to have to recognize before you click send in that email, right? Before the chatbot answers the question, it needs to be tested thoroughly. The biggest component of swing is what is the human going to do with the machine, right? The human interaction with those items or those questions, we have to try and predict. And you can't just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, give me the questions the human's going to ask, right? Because it only knows the history, right? It sees the memory and the values. It doesn't know what you're thinking for the future. So we, as leadership, need to sit and talk and set those expectations with our teams, and we have to test them and try them before we give them to the general public.
I think the challenge presented by AGI is here today. I don't think today it's not. Whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, there's a challenge today. People believe it is sentient. It is cognitive. Mattel is putting it into Barbie and Thomas the Tank. Your 3-year-old is not going to know the difference, and that's scary. So I think we have to think about that today.
Yeah, I will be a little on the contrarian side around AGI because, one of the things that we have seen till now with AI is that it depends on the knowledge that is already being created. We haven't seen or have a path towards creating fresh content, new content that is, in terms of the likes of, let's say, Shakespeare writing those poems. So I think there is a chasm that has to be crossed before that happens. I give an example. About 5-7 years ago, I was with the director of the MIT Center for Transportation Logistics, and I asked Yoshi if we would have at that point, Tesla was selling the full self-drive capability, saying that it will automatically run in all environments and conditions. And he said this is not going to happen for 10 to 20 years. And it hasn't happened till now. And is unlikely, though, Elon Musk is saying that he will do it with no pedals and no wheels in a car next year. But, Musk always overpromises. The thing about this is that, there are regulatory frameworks that have to come into place. So when you talk about AGI, if AGI were to be implemented within the next 5-10 years, you have to understand how that relationship between the human and that system would work. And these are frameworks, legal frameworks that have to be put in place before anything like that can be released. So I think this is, probably 10, 20 years or more ahead of us.
Hi. I'd like to touch a bit more on the ethics and the data, because I think we're sort of skirting around as an industry. It's very much rules for thee and not for me, right? We know that the data was collected from copywritten sources. There's a lawsuit currently filed by Disney against OpenAI because it can just at will produce copywritten protected creatures, right? So what can we as an industry do to reset that, right? I believe someone at Meta is on record saying look, if we followed the rules, the entire AI industry would collapse overnight. How do we deal with that as an industry?
I mean, I hate to say this, but I think the horse has left the barn, and I don't know that we can go. You can't untrain the model, right? So, what do we do going forward to make sure we don't continue to use new material? That's a tough question, because I agree there are people who are not being ethical about it. I think the people who are being ethical have to be loud and peer pressure everybody else into doing it.
Yeah, I think it's be a champion of it. I wish there was an answer to that question, and I think it's left the barn. But yeah, you have to be a champion and start putting some of those things into your organization. So it's a good question.
I think from an enterprise perspective, it's important to start building governance structures within the organization. And if it is not there, to ask your, leadership, on their stance on putting the right framework and governance and processes in place. Because eventually it has to be a bottoms up. It can't be, by top down, you see that, the U.S. environment is leaning towards, going fast rather than with controls. So it's not going to happen from the top. It's got to come up from within the organization.
I think it was Kristen that said in the enterprise, we're going to block some of these generally used tools like a ChatGPT or something like that, right? We have to control which tools that we're handing to the teams of people that are using them. We have to build these policies and then enforce them. We are not always going to be able to police the general public, but within the enterprise, within our space, right? We have to give the training, the tools, the education, so those staff are using the pieces that we want them to, and we have to use traditional security metrics, something as simple as a DNS redirect or a block on those tools that we do not want them to use.
And we have to tell people what the right and wrong way to do it is, right? Because there's so much misinformation out there, and there's just so much that's new that I think you're right. I think companies have to set those standards and make sure that their team members know them.
One of the things I've struggled with personally with adoption of AI tools in my company has been the right model for the right job and evaluating these new models against existing things. Like, I'm in the e-commerce space, so everyone's always promising the newest and the greatest product recommendation engine. So I was wondering if anyone had any advice about, discussing something like that versus something that already existed since like 92, like a priori, or another more traditional algorithm that doesn't have that sexy AI label as a control against, what's new and hot right now.
I mean, we experiment, we test them, and we see which gives us better results. And we have a standard set of tests that we do against it, and we see how they perform against them. So, but we've had to build our code in a way that we can switch out that engine or that model, and do that experiment. But yeah, we use data to decide.
Zach, I like that question a lot, and I agree with Beth. You have to do the dirty work. You guys are in positions as leaders, as technologists that know how to use those tools. You're experimenting with those things personally and professionally. You need to have a panel or a group internally to test them. Create a peer group, create the use case, architect it, test against it, and those trial and tribulations it's going to show up, right? And the examples that you gave specifically around e-commerce and the old-fashioned tool sets versus the new ones goes back to what Kristen says every single time. No clean data, right? Use what you have, clean the data, normalize it, trust the systems, and trust the people using it, but test it.
One of the examples around e-commerce, I think you might have heard about it, is Walmart is big on AI now. The CEO has said he's going to change the organization. So one example they quote is that on the website, now they have a feature where you can search for a product by use case instead of individual items. And that has resulted, according to them, in a 22% increase in e-commerce sales. I don't believe that it's the only contributor, but it's something like that where, you're adding capabilities that might move the meter a little bit in terms of revenue, additional revenue increases. May not be 22%, but even if it's a 2-3% improvement, it's a significant ROI.
Hi guys, thanks for being here. Good question. What's your 10 cents opinion on AI and crypto forecasting and buying? How's that?
So, 2 cents, not 10. But I'll say, I think there was this discussion where Austin was saying that many years ago, there was this blockchain. I think we are in a similar state. Blockchain has become mature over time. And, now people are trusting this distributed ledger concept much more than they were in those days. And I think that's a similar kind of situation that will happen. We'll probably go through this hype cycle. Eventually, we get more use cases where ROI is shown and proven. And I think that will start adoption, but whether it will completely, replace people and do the AGI that gentleman was talking about, I think that is a little too far.
Thank you for all the answers and the discussion here. So, I come from cyber background, and the discussion here is enlightening, right? So to that end, question I would have is in terms of data, right? And data being monetized by companies like OpenAI, whatnot. What is your thought process on data becoming the new perimeter for monetization, right? It already probably is, but never was actually seen that way because it was about network as a perimeter or an identity as a perimeter. What in your opinion, would need to happen for realizing value out of data and data is being seen as the new perimeter for future business models?
I think I know we're seeing it already in healthcare. Not too thrilled with the idea, but it is happening. Mayo Clinic has access to huge amounts of data. They've anonymized it so that you make it available to do this, and they're selling it and making it available to companies that need this data. I'm particularly challenged because I think of it as my data and I'm not getting any value out of them selling it. But there's also a business model need there. But yeah, we are seeing that today. The data has value. Companies, particularly in healthcare, are monetizing that.
I think behind the scenes, all of us have always known that data is king, right? You can't make decisions with smaller data sets and be anything other than subjective to that information. We have to look at it holistically in big data worlds and make decisions as a team. We have to look at the data and make sure that it's right, because sometimes the data set gets skewed. And we have to make sure that going into the conversation and how you're going to monetize with that information is appropriate for the business or the genre that you're in.
There is also one other aspect I would say. If you ask an engine now, any LLM model, what do you know about myself? There's a lot of stuff they know because of the chat that you continue, right? So I think it is important also to consider the boundaries around, your interaction with these models and how much they. So, today I, in fact, checked off the box. There was, I think, Lord was asking me whether they could retain my data for 5 years. I said, no, 30 days is the maximum that I will allow. So I think there is a little bit of concern around that, which I think individual awareness is going to be important.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll end with one more question.
Thank you. Great discussion. I heard about AGI, but I wanted to ask about the risk about quantum computing combined with AI risk. Like every known encryption standard is going to be wiped out, or GPS satellites are at risk. So what do you think about quantum?
I think we're trying to wrap up, so I can wrap that up with I love a quote by Bill Gates, who's smarter than I am. And he has said, we tend to overestimate what is possible in the 2-year horizon, but underestimate the 10-year horizon. We have no idea what's coming. And when quantum comes together with the AI, it's a whole nother world. We don't know what's coming yet, but I look forward to it. Thank you to the panelists for being here tonight. Have a great night, everybody.
Did you